Hi, I'm Porter, and welcome to this documentary on the fall of the Berlin Wall, one of the most iconic moments in the Cold War.
We are 4 students from Oak Farm Montessori, which means we are encouraged to think critically, and then immediately decide to make a crash course style documentary.
I'm Kirsten. I'm here to explain history and occasionally point out when governments make very bad decisions.
And I'm Cooper. I'll be connecting the dots and reminding everyone that this all somehow started on Monday nights.
Now, when people think about the Berlin Wall coming down in 1989, they usually imagine politicians, press conferences, or crowds climbing on concrete slabs with hammers.
Which makes sense, because smashing a wall is very cinematic.
But the real story starts somewhere else entirely. In the city of Leipzig on Monday nights, with candles, church prayers, and a government that had absolutely no idea what to do next.
So today's big question is, how did the East German government's reaction to the Leipzig Monday demonstrations accelerate the fall of the Berlin Wall?
Short answer, hesitation. Long answer, history.
The fall of the Berlin Wall was not the result of the sudden reform or violence, but of the East German government's failure to respond decisively to the Leipzig Monday demonstrations, which exposed the regime's weakness and allowed peaceful resistance to spread uncontrollably across the nation.
First, some context, because the Cold War is never simple. After World War II, Germany was split in two. West Germany began a democratic state aligned with the United States and Western Europe. East Germany became a communist state aligned with the Soviet Union.
Same language, same culture, completely different systems.
East Germany, officially called the German Democratic Republic, was ruled by one political party and heavily policed by the Stasi, one of the most effective and terrifying secret police forces in history. Free speech was limited, free travel was basically non-existent. Political opposition was illegal.
So if you didn't like the government definitely knew.
To stop people from leaving for West Germany, the East German government built the Berlin Wall in 1961.
That's right. And over time, the wall became the most powerful symbol of Cold War division and government control. For decades, this system worked mostly because people were afraid. Protests usually ended in arrests, prison, or worse. But by 1989, 3 big things had changed. First, the East German economy was struggling. Stores were empty, technology lagged behind the West, and living standards were falling.
Second, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev introduced reforms like glasnost and perestroika.
And more importantly, made it clear the Soviet Union would no longer send tanks to crush protests in Eastern Europe.
Which was basically the Soviet Union saying, you're on your own now.
And third, people were running out of patience. Thousands of East Germans were fleeing through Hungary and Czechoslovakia. Others decided to stay and demand change.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Which brings us to Leipzig.
In Leipzig, people gathered every Monday evening at St. Nicholas Church for peace prayers. At first, these meetings focused on nonviolence and human rights, but after the prayers ended, people didn't go home. They went outside. Holding candles, they marched to the streets chanting, "Wir sind das Volk," meaning, "We are the people."
which was a direct challenge to the government's authority.
Exactly. The government claimed it ruled on behalf of the people. Now the people were publicly disagreeing. And here's the important part. This didn't happen once.
It happened every single Monday.
The crowds grew, hundreds turned to thousands, and the government started to panic.
At first, the East German government reacted the only way it knew how. The Stasi-filmed demonstrators. People were threatened, interrogated, and arrested. State-controlled media labeled protesters as criminals and enemies of socialism. Behind the scenes, security forces prepared for violence. Hospitals were warned to expect mass casualties. Police and soldiers stood ready.
Everyone, including the protesters, expected a crackdown.
All of that fear came to a halt on one night, October 9th, 1989.
That Monday night, more than 70,000 people filled the streets of Leipzig. This was no longer a small protest. It was a movement. Security forces had weapons, orders were drafted, the government had a choice, crack down violently or back down. And then something historic happened. The government did nothing.
Which is not usually the plan.
No shots were fired, no mass arrests, no bloodshed. Against all expectations, the protesters marched peacefully and went home safely. This moment was a turning point, not just for Leipzig, but for all of East Germany.
In authoritarian states, power depends on fear. And on October 9th, the East German government showed that it was afraid too. By failing to crush the Leipzig protest, the regime sent an unintended message. The rules had been changed.
And people noticed.
Word spread fast. If Leipzig could protest safely, other cities could too. And they did.
Over the next few weeks, demonstrations exploded across East Germany. Tens of thousands became hundreds of thousands. The demands grew bolder, from reform to free elections to freedom of travel. The government tried to regain control by replacing longtime leader Erich Honecker with Egon Kries and promising reforms.
But by then, nobody was buying it.
The people no longer believed in the state. Every peaceful protest made the government look weaker.
The Berlin Wall only worked if guards believed they would be backed up. After Leipzig, that belief disappeared. Border guards saw the crowds. They heard the chants. They knew the government hesitated to use force. So when a confused official announced on November 9th, 1989, that travel restrictions were lifted,
The guards didn't shoot.
they opened the gates.
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 The wall fell, not because it was destroyed, but because the government no longer had the will to enforce it. So how did the East German government's reaction to the Leipzig Monday demonstrations accelerate the fall of the Berlin Wall?
By hesitating instead of repressing.
By showing that fear no longer worked.
And by letting a peaceful movement grow beyond its control.
What started as church prayers on Monday nights became a revolution that reshaped Germany and the world.
Which proves that sometimes
The most important moment in history.
Is when a government does absolutely nothing wrong.
I wasn't trying to overthrow the government. I just wanted my voice heard. And once we realized they weren't stopping us, we kept coming back every Monday. If we allow this protest to continue, we risk losing control. But if we use force, we may create martyrs. We were prepared for violence. We had orders drafted, but no one was willing to give the final command. For the first time, it looked like the wall was being defeated not by force, but by people refusing to be afraid. Reform cannot survive if it depends on violence. If people demand change, force will only make it inevitable. We had no clear orders, and when the crowds kept growing, we chose not to fire. Walls cannot permanently divide people who want freedom.
I had a guardian angel that night. I knew there were alarms at the bridge. In the twilight, I saw a thin piece of wire stretched from bridge post to bridge post. If I had touched it, it would have gone off and they would have immediately fired shots.
If someone gets offended, they're a communist, and I'm prepared to take them, bro.
Thanks for watching.